Rachel Edidin.
And I'm Miles Stokes.
And we're the hosts of Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men, a weekly podcast where we walk listeners through the ins, outs, and retcons of our favorite superhero soap opera.
We're also the co-hosts of Rachel and Miles Review the X-Men,
which you're watching right now,
where we talk about the X-books that come out each week.
So this week we're going to be looking at the week of April 15th, 2015. We've got 4 X-books and 1 Black Vortex tie-in. Let's dive in. First up, we have Spider-Man and the X-Men number 5, written by Elliot Kalin, drawn by Marco Fela, and colored by Ian Herring. And man, it is just a whole lot of fun. Kalin's got this lighthearted kind of left of continuity teenage hijinks adventure book that I feel like tonally is actually pretty close to what Claremont might have been shooting for with his most recent Nightcrawler series.
I can see that. I do think that Nightcrawler was going for a bit more overt romanticism than this book seems to be.
Dude, are you dissing the amazing star-crossed romance of Shark Girl and Hellion? Because I have some feelings about that.
I would never diss that.
Damn straight. But yeah, the book is fun. The writing is really lighthearted. The art is dynamic and bright. It's a really nice vacation from everything else, kind of. It
kind of is, yeah. Just having a purely X comedy book, I think, is a very good thing in the line. Watching Spider-Man bounce off all the X characters, like seeing Beast yell at Peter Parker for pretending not to know the difference between flammable and inflammable, having Spider-Man describe how he got his black costume in a way that sounded like it could come straight out of our podcast.
Yeah, we've talked about this, I think, with Amazing most recently. But this is also a team that just really clicks well both with each other and with the premise. Kalin, Fela, and Herring are just kind of nailing it as a group. And yeah, God, the whole issue this week kind of reads like a series of our cold opens cobbled together in terms of the deep dives into Marvel weird. So yeah, highly recommended. If you're not following it already, they'll explain it as you go.
Next is Uncanny X-Men number 33, written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Chris Anka and colors by Antonio Fabela.
And look, let me spoil this right now. If you are looking for 20 pages of monster fighting sass, you will find it here.
Yeah, it's something I've been waiting for a very long time, which is for Illyana and Kitty to finally have an adventure together. Illyana's been back from the dead for quite a while now, and they haven't really had that. And given that they were best friends, well, technically a slightly different version of Illyana, but whatever, close enough.
Best friends.
Back in the day, it was nice to see that. And also, they're on Monster Island. Now, the only place I like more than Monster Island is Vampire Island.
But what if there were some kind of overlap? Do you think they have an exchange program?
Maybe, like Fin Fang Foom goes and like stomps on things on Vampire Island.
Well, or goes and learns vampire skills.
Oh, okay.
Sassy rhetoric. I don't know. I'm thinking of the most recent version of Dracula, who's basically just all about being snarky and entertaining.
Yes, he is. But it starts out as sort of a humorous issue with, Kitty kind of being annoyed with Illyana for going and fighting monsters just because she's mad at what's going on at the school. And it actually manages to find a lot of heart. The two characters are, it turns out, trying to rescue a small child who's been abandoned on Monster Island, and ends with them bringing this kid to the school. And it's surprisingly emotionally resonant.
Yeah, there's a lot to this friendship and a lot of history to it, and we've seen surprisingly little of that since Illyana's resurrection, and it's really nice to see the two of them get to have those moments and get to actually go a little bit deeper than the superficial logistics that have sort of dominated their interactions so far.
Right down to Kitty joking about Illyana's darkness and her saying, hey, actually, that really hurts, and Kitty realizing, that I can see why it would. It's phenomenal writing. I mean, Brian Bendis, he took a few issues to get the voices of the X-Men, but by this point, for the vast majority of them, he has got them down, and this issue is a perfect example of that.
It's also a really strong standalone. If you're a fan of these two characters and you haven't been following Uncanny, you'll be able to jump in with very, very little trouble at this point.
Yeah, dive right in. It's well worth it.
Next up, we have Magneto number 17, written by Cullen Bunn, drawn by Gabriel Hernandez Walta, and colored by Jordie Bellaire. Look, we have been talking this series up for 17 issues, and that's not going to change, and it's really not going to change this issue, because it's gorgeous. I think we mentioned last issue how much Jordie Bellaire, the colorist, has done to define this book, and that just gets driven home every new issue.
Right. I mean, I think if one weren't paying attention, could criticize the fact that it's basically just gray all the time with a few exceptions, but it is the most perfectly chosen, nuanced gray and brown and occasional flashes of other color. It gets across exactly what it intends to.
Yeah, I will say, if you are not someone who tends to pay a lot of attention to color in comics, this issue in particular, follow the red.
Yes.
Because there's a lot of story there, and there's a lot of story that you'll miss if you're not paying attention to it.
Just to the colors, yeah.
In terms of the story, I was actually kind of prepared to dislike this arc, because it's Magneto fighting his Nazi ghosts, and how many times have we seen that? But Oh man, Bunn puts a really different twist on it, and he puts a twist on it that's very dark, very interesting, and very, very portentous in terms of both where Magneto is now and his potential future on Genosha.
Right, when we find out what's going on and what Magneto decides to do about that, it is legitimately chilling.
Yeah, this issue is a significant event horizon. I would not jump in unless you've been following at least this arc of the series, but if you have, it is one hell of a payoff.
Yeah, we're going to see Magneto continue into Secret Wars under the Last Days banner, and I don't know what's going to happen after Secret Wars, but if we can have this creative team doing a book like this, whether it's with Magneto or not, I would love to see more of that. Next is Legendary Star-Lord number 11, which is the Black Vortex Part 12, written by Sam Humphries, with pencils by Paco Medina, inks by Juan Velasco, and colors by David Curiel.
Can we just ignore the Black Vortex?
I mean, we've gotten 11 parts into the 13-part story already. I feel like we might as well finish it off.
You know, this is the attitude that kept you reading comics through the mid-90s.
I guess that's true. I did eventually quit before Onslaught got there, so I dodged a bullet. But anyway, so this is the first Black Vortex chapter we've had in a little while where it's actually part of the main story. The last couple were Cyclops and Captain Marvel, mostly character pieces with the context of the Black Vortex there. And it's kind of like the rest of the series. It's fine. It's fun. It's very lightweight to the point of potentially being a little pointless.
It's very much a Kitty Pryde book, not a Star-Lord book, too.
Yeah, and from what I understand, since she and Star-Lord have been in a relationship, that's often been the case. She's been a major player in that book.
So, like, at this point, legally, there's some kind of palimony deal where half of the book is hers?
Possibly? I'm not really sure how that works with intergalactic law, space law. So it's fine. I mean, we do have some good high stakes. I like the idea that the whole big villainous plot is that the Brood are ultimately going to have a planet encased in amber, put their embryos into every single person on there, and have the entire planet hatch into Brood. Like, that's cool. I can dig that. But at the same time, it's just a space romp. And that's okay if you keep it brief, if you keep it punchy and concise, and this has been going on for 12 parts at this point.
Yeah, I feel like this is about 6 to 8 issues longer than it really needed to be. We should have had a brief core story, a handful of optional tie-ins, and then been done with it and gone on with our lives.
Yeah, but that's not what we have. This time, I guess the big thing is who's going to submit to the Black Vortex to become a super version of themselves, to fight the bad guys. And
you mean in addition to all of the people who already have and it wasn't that big a deal?
Exactly. I mean, it's treated as this huge, huge deal, but we've seen a number of characters do this, and many of them be completely fine when they do so. So
but
that's
Miles,
a little...
it's the Black Vortex. It's a big ornate mirror that makes you fancy.
I prefer the Siege Perilous as big ornate mirrors go, personally. So, you know, it's okay. Like, maybe if you like the space stuff, pick it up and trade later on. I think it's pretty inessential at this point, but, you know, it's not actively offensively bad. It's just sort of fine.
Finally, and speaking of series that have kind of outlived their scope, we have Wolverines number 14, written by Ray Fox, drawn by Salvador Larroca, and colored by Sonia Oback. It's okay.
Yeah, pretty much. I like Larroca's art. I generally have enjoyed it.
I'm generally in favor of surprise Blade cameos.
Yes, guys, Blade. I love Blade. Every time he shows up, I smile, and I don't like vampires at all, but I do like Blade.
Well, Blade doesn't like vampires either.
Maybe that's why I like
Clearly
Blade.
you have things in common.
Yeah, well, anyway.
It's unremarkable. I like the tiny thread of Mystique's big master plan we see, but it's such a tiny, thin thread spun out over so long that I wonder how much more it can really hold.
Yeah, I will say I did like Daken and X-23 spending some time together as sort of the pseudo-siblings that they are, X-23 trying to keep Daken out of trouble. Like, there's some interesting stuff to be found there, but the issue really is all over the place. It doesn't have a central thematic thread the way that weirdly enough, the way that some of the Fang issues did a few issues back.
Yeah, as a series, this has been really scattered. I think some of that is probably fundamental to a weekly book, just because there's so much to get through so fast. Some of it is also that the premise for this is kind of thin. I don't know that it can really sustain an ongoing series in the way that they've tried to have it sustain this one. And again, there are subplots, but there's not a lot of reason for this team to be together, and there's not really a lot of reminder of the reasons that this team is together. And right now, it just sort of feels there.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, the series has vacillated wildly in quality from one issue to the next, so who knows, the next issue could be incredibly fun, but it's really hard to say at this point. So those are our 5 books. Rachel, what's your favorite?
It was a really tight contest this week, but while Uncanny 33 was really solid, I think the absolute best at least of this batch, was Magneto 17. If nothing else, as defenders of truth and beauty, we live, die, and worship at the altar of Jordie Bellaire's colors.
Yeah, seriously. This was a really satisfying issue, a satisfying, well, I'm not going to say end, but perhaps climax to a surprisingly good arc. The series remains very, very solid.
It's both well-crafted and a very, very good piece of characterization of a character who's been very inconsistently written over the years. It's satisfying to me as a process wonk and as a comics snob, and it's really satisfying to me as an X-Men and Magneto fan.
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, what's our panel of the week?
Our panel is very tonally different. That is, in fact, from Uncanny X-Men 33, where Kitty is still mad at Illyana for taking her to Monster Island. The monsters are completely unaware of sort of the friendship, or whatever, spat that they're having, and I just love how indifferent Kitty is to this monster diving at her, because all she cares about is letting Illyana know how pissed off she is. So that's it for today. Thanks for watching.
If you like what you've seen here, please check out our podcast, Rachel and Miles Explain the X-Men. New episodes go up every Sunday at rachelandmiles.com and on iTunes and Stitcher. So Miles, what have we got for them this week?
So this week we're starting our second year of podcasting with a new era for the X-Men, where Magneto runs the school and Jean Grey comes back from the dead in one of the most over-the-top retcons in comic book history.
These videos, the podcast, and everything else at rachelandmiles.com is brought to you courtesy of our awesome Patreon subscribers. We are entirely ad-free and listener-supported. If you want to join the folks who make this stuff possible, you can do that at the link either above or below, depending on whether you're looking at this on YouTube or on our website. We've just introduced a bunch of new Patreon milestone goals. I hope you'll take a minute to check them out.
Yes, and in the meantime, we will see you next time.
What more is there to say? You're right. I would have been ashamed to have left that off.